They were told the monsters would come with knives. Instead, they came with bandages. And that changed everything. September 1945, northern Okinawa. The caves smelled like death and desperation, a suffocating mixture of unwashed bodies, infected wounds, and human waste. Yuki Nakamura crouched in the darkness, her back pressed against jagged limestone that had scraped her skin raw weeks ago. The wounds on her back had scabbed over, then reopened, then scabbed again. She no longer felt them. Pain had become such a constant companion that it had transformed into background noise, like the drip of water from the cave ceiling or the ragged breathing of 26 other women sharing this tomb. She counted the days since the last grain of rice had passed her lips. 17. No, 18. Time was difficult to track in the darkness. Some women marked the days by scratching lines into the cave wall with sharp stones. Others had given up counting. What did numbers matter when the end was inevitable? The mathematics of starvation were simple. The human body could survive approximately 3 weeks without food, less if already malnourished, even less if expending energy. They had passed the threshold. They were living on borrowed time, bodies consuming themselves from the inside out. 27 women in total. Some were nurses who had tended to wounded soldiers until the field hospitals were overrun. Some were telegraph operators like Yuki, trained to transmit coded messages across vast distances, now reduced to creatures hiding in the earth like animals. One had been a school teacher in Naha before the bombing. Another had worked in the administrative offices of the naval base. Their previous identities meant nothing now. They were all the same thing, casualties waiting to happen. The war had erased their individual stories and rewritten them all with the same ending. Outside, American voices echoed through the jungle, harsh syllables in a language that sounded like aggression, even when it wasn't. Boots crunched on volcanic rock. Equipment rattled. Flashlight beams swept across the cave entrance, probing the darkness like fingers reaching for prey. Yuki's hand moved to her sleeve where the razor blade was hidden, sewn into the fabric with careful stitches. She had carried it for 3 years, ever since the propaganda officers distributed them to every woman in the communications unit. The instructions had been delivered with bureaucratic efficiency, as if they were discussing supply requisitions rather than suicide protocols. The officer had been young, probably 25, with wire-rimmed glasses and a clipboard. His voice had been steady and professional. Each of you will receive a blade. Keep it with you at all times. If capture is imminent and escape is impossible, you know what to do. Death before dishonor. Silence before screaming. The Emperor expects your final service. Close your eyes and don't scream. Let your last breath be silent. Let your last thought be of His Majesty and the divine nation you have the honor to serve. The women had received their blades without comment. Some had cried quietly that night. Others had sharpened the edges on stones, testing them against their skin, calculating the exact angle and pressure required. Yuki had simply sewn hers into her sleeve and tried not to think about it. But now, 3 years later, with American soldiers closing in, the blade felt like the only certainty left in an uncertain world. Haruko whispered the mantra now, her voice carrying no emotion, just the hollow certainty of someone who had already died inside. She was the eldest among them at 32, though she looked 50. Starvation had carved her face into a skull covered with parchment skin. Her eyes were sunken, her lips cracked and bleeding, but her spine remained straight. Whatever else the war had taken from her, it had not taken her pride. "Close your eyes and don't scream," she whispered. "Close your eyes and don't scream." The younger ones repeated it like a prayer, a mantra to drive away fear. Keiko, 19 years old, with a face that had once been round with adolescent softness, now gaunt and angular, clutched a sharp stone in her trembling hands. She had found it 3 days ago, spent hours grinding it against the cave wall to create a point. Insurance, she called it. A backup plan. She held it now like a talisman. "Close your eyes and don't scream," she murmured. "Close your eyes and don't scream." Yuki didn't whisper it. She had stopped believing in mantras weeks ago, stopped believing in a lot of things. The first belief to die was the promise of rescue. They had waited in these caves for Imperial forces to push back the American invasion. They had waited for supply drops that never came. They had waited for orders that never arrived. Then they had waited for death, which proved surprisingly slow in coming. The second belief to die was the promise of victory. Even isolated in the caves, they heard the sounds of the invasion, the naval bombardments that made the earth shake, the aircraft that filled the sky like locusts, the explosions that continued day and night for weeks, the silence that eventually followed, more terrifying than the noise because it meant the battle was over, and they had lost. The third belief to die was the promise that their sacrifice mattered. Yuki had watched 2 women die from infected wounds that could have been treated with basic medicine. She had held their hands as fever consumed them, as they called out for mothers and children they would never see again. They died in agony in a cave that smelled like rot, died for an emperor who didn't know their names, died for a war that was already lost. Their deaths accomplished nothing except adding 2 more bodies to the pile, but Yuki still believed in the propaganda about Americans. She believed it because it was the one belief that made sense. Everything else about the war had been lies. The promises of victory, the guarantees that Japan would never fall, the assurances that their sacrifice was necessary and noble. All lies. But surely the warnings about the enemy were true. Surely the stories were based on something real. The systematic torture, the medical experiments, the degradation of prisoners. Why would they lie about that? What purpose would it serve? She had heard the stories since childhood. Americans were savages, descended from inferior stock, lacking the spiritual refinement of the Japanese race. They raped and pillaged. They conducted experiments on living subjects. They treated prisoners worse than animals. These stories came from official sources, from newspapers and radio broadcasts and military briefings. They came with evidence, photographs of atrocities, testimony from survivors, detailed reports from intelligence officers. It couldn't all be fabrication. Some of it had to be true. The cave entrance darkened. Flashlight beams cut through the gloom like searchlights, illuminating dancing dust motes and the huddled forms of desperate women. American soldiers appeared, silhouettes against the afternoon sun, young faces under steel helmets, rifles pointed downward in a non-threatening posture that seemed almost casual. One of them shouted something in English, his voice carrying a tone that was difficult to interpret. Command, request, warning. Yuki understood a few words. Her training had included basic English for intercepting enemy communications. Come out. Hands. No weapons. Please. That last word surprised her. Please. Did conquerors say please? Did monsters offer polite requests before the torture began? She filed the observation away, part of her mind still analyzing data even as the rest of her prepared for death. The women pressed tighter against the cave walls, trying to make themselves smaller, invisible, anything to delay the inevitable. This was it, the final moment, the culmination of 3 years of war and weeks of starvation. The razor blade felt heavy in Yuki's sleeve. Her fingers closed around it through the fabric. Simple mechanics, vertical cuts along the wrists, deep enough to sever the radial artery. 2 minutes to unconsciousness, 5 minutes to death. Quick, relatively painless, honorable. But something about the scene outside felt wrong. The soldiers weren't charging, they weren't screaming. They weren't dragging women out by their hair. They stood at the cave entrance in a loose semicircle, rifles lowered, postures relaxed. One of them, a young man who looked barely old enough to shave, set his rifle against a rock and held up both hands. Empty palms, the universal gesture of non-aggression. Another soldier pulled something from his pack. A white cloth. He waved it slowly, deliberately. A flag of truce. A third soldier, slightly older, called out again in that harsh English. His tone was softer this time, almost gentle. The words were incomprehensible except for one. Safe. You are safe. Yuki knew that word. Safe. But the concept made no sense. How could prisoners be safe? Safety and captivity were mutually exclusive states. Then the younger soldier stepped forward, the one who had set down his rifle. He wore glasses that reflected the sunlight, making his eyes invisible. He spoke in Japanese, badly mangled pronunciation but comprehensible. We will not hurt you. Please come out. You need food. You need doctor. Each word was carefully enunciated, as if he had practiced them. His accent was atrocious. Vowels stretched in strange directions, consonants landing in the wrong places. But the meaning was clear. Lies. Obviously, lies. This was the psychological phase of torture, the part where they established false trust before the betrayal. Yuki had read about these tactics in training materials. Make prisoners feel safe, lower their defenses, then strike when they were vulnerable. The cruelty was in the deception, the moment when hope was offered and then snatched away. Better to never hope at all. But then the soldier did something unexpected. He removed his helmet and set it on the ground next to his rifle. Then he unbuckled his combat webbing and placed that down too. He stood in just his uniform, unarmed, vulnerable. Behind him, 3 other soldiers did the same. Rifles placed carefully on the ground, helmets removed, hands raised to show they were empty. One by one, 5 American soldiers disarmed themselves in front of a cave full of enemy combatants. Yuki's mind raced through the tactical implications. What kind of advantage did voluntary disarmament provide? What psychological strategy involved making yourself vulnerable to attack? Unless they had reinforcements hidden in the jungle, snipers positioned to kill anyone who emerged from the cave. That had to be it. This was bait, a trap. The smart move was to stay hidden, call their bluff, wait for them to give up, and leave. But as she watched their faces, she saw something that didn't fit the trap hypothesis. Fear. Real fear. The young soldier with glasses had sweat running down his temple despite the cool air. His hands trembled slightly as he held them up. Another soldier kept glancing nervously at the cave entrance, as if worried about what might come charging out. They were afraid of the women in the cave. Actually, afraid. That realization cracked something open in Yuki's chest. Why would conquerors fear their prisoners? Why would armed soldiers be nervous about starving women? The power dynamic was completely wrong, unless they weren't sure what they were dealing with, unless they expected resistance or suicide attacks, unless they genuinely didn't want anyone to die. That possibility was so foreign to Yuki's worldview that she couldn't fully process it. Hunger made the decision. One of the women near the entrance, a former nurse named Tomoko who had been delirious for 2 days, stumbled forward. She didn't make a conscious choice to surrender. Her body simply gave out, betrayed by exhaustion and starvation. She collapsed at the cave mouth, too weak to stand, sprawled in the dirt like a broken doll. The young soldier with glasses rushed forward without hesitation, not with violence but with a canteen. He knelt beside her, unscrewed the cap with shaking hands and held it to her lips. Water. Clean, clear water. Tomoko drank desperately, choking and coughing, water running down her chin. The soldier supported her head with one hand, patient and gentle, murmuring something in English that sounded like reassurance. He called back to the other soldiers. More canteens appeared. Medical supplies materialized from packs. A stretcher was brought forward. Within minutes, they had Tomoko stabilized. One soldier checked her pulse. Another examined her eyes, looking for signs of severe dehydration. A third wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Someone offered her a piece of chocolate, broken off from a ration bar. She took it with shaking hands and began to weep, great heaving sobs that echoed through the cave. The other women watched in silence. 26 pairs of hollow eyes tracked every movement, every gesture. Calculations flickered behind those eyes. This could still be a trick. The kindness could be strategic, designed to lure them out before the real torture began. But tricks required energy, and they had none left to resist. Starvation had stolen their ability to fight. If the Americans wanted to hurt them, they could do it whether the women were in the cave or outside it. At least outside there was water. One by one they emerged, hands raised, blades hidden but ready, eyes squeezed shut against the sunlight and against the horror they expected to witness. Close your eyes and don't scream. But the screaming never came. Instead, gentle hands guided them toward waiting trucks. Medics with Red Cross armbands moved through the group, checking pulses, examining wounds, making notes on clipboards. Someone draped blankets over skeletal shoulders. Someone else passed out canteens and field rations, small portions carefully calculated for stomachs that had forgotten how to process food. Yuki stood in the sunlight for the first time in 6 weeks and felt the world tilt on its axis. The light was blinding after so long in darkness. The air was fresh and clean, free of the cave's fetid atmosphere, and nothing was happening the way it was supposed to happen. Where were the chains? Where were the cattle cars to the experimentation facilities? Where were the leering faces and cruel hands? Where was the violence they had been promised, prepared for, accepted as inevitable. An American soldier approached her, a woman with sergeant stripes on her uniform. She was tall and sturdy with a kind face and eyes that crinkled at the corners. She spoke in simple English, gesturing to make her meaning clear. Truck, hospital, food, medicine, safe. That word again, safe. She offered Yuki her hand, not to grab or restrain, but to help her walk. Yuki stared at the offered hand for a long moment, processing the implications. Help. The enemy was offering help. She took the hand. The sergeant's grip was firm, but gentle. She guided Yuki toward the waiting trucks, supporting her weight when she stumbled. The truck ride lasted 40 minutes along rutted roads carved through devastated jungle. Yuki sat between Haruko and Keiko in the covered truck bed, all three women silent, watching the landscape roll past through the gap in the canvas. Destroyed villages reduced to blackened foundations, burned fields where crops had once grown, enormous craters from naval bombardment. The aftermath of the battle that had consumed Okinawa stretched as far as the eye could see, but there were also signs of recovery. American soldiers worked alongside Okinawan civilians, clearing rubble and rebuilding roads. Supply depots distributed food and medicine. Children, impossibly still alive, played in the ruins with the resilience of the young. Life persisted even in devastation. The truck passed through an American encampment where soldiers sat in the sun cleaning weapons, writing letters, playing cards. They looked tired and bored, not savage or cruel. Just young men far from home, waiting for orders to take them somewhere else. None of the soldiers leered at the truck full of Japanese women. None made threatening gestures. A few glanced up with mild curiosity, then returned to their activities. One soldier, sitting on a crate and reading a book, didn't even look up. The mundanity of it was almost more disturbing than violence would have been. These were supposed to be monsters. Monsters didn't read books in the afternoon sun. Monsters didn't look bored and homesick. They arrived at a military installation that sprawled across several acres. Barbed wire perimeter, guard towers with searchlights, armed sentries at the gates. This was it. The facade would drop now. The prison camp would reveal its true nature. The psychological phase would end and the physical phase would begin. Yuki's hand moved to the blade in her sleeve, ready for the final act. They were herded off the trucks, not roughly, but efficiently, and into a processing area, a long building with a corrugated metal roof, tables set up with paperwork and medical supplies. Several American personnel moved about with purposeful efficiency, and then a woman in an American military uniform approached, wearing the insignia of a medical officer. Her face was Asian, Chinese perhaps, with delicate features and intelligent eyes. She spoke in perfect Japanese, not broken or accented but fluent and natural. "My name is Dr. Catherine Chen. I'm a physician with the United States Army Medical Corps. You are safe here. We are going to examine you for diseases and injuries. We will not harm you. You have my word as a doctor and as a human being. Some of you are severely malnourished. Some have infections that need treatment. We're going to help you. I know you don't trust us. I understand why. But I'm asking you to give us a chance to prove that your distrust is misplaced." Words were cheap. Yuki had learned that lesson thoroughly over the past 4 years. Promises were tactical tools deployed to manipulate behavior. She filed through the examination room with the others, prepared for the worst, hoping only that the end would be quick. Dr. Chen worked with professional efficiency and unexpected gentleness. She checked Yuki's eyes, pulling down the lower lid to examine the color of the tissue. "Severe anemia," she murmured in Japanese, making notes. She examined Yuki's throat, her lymph nodes, feeling for swelling or abnormalities. She listened to Yuki's heartbeat with a stethoscope, frowning at what she heard. "Arrhythmia from malnutrition. We'll need to monitor that." She palpated Yuki's abdomen, noting the distension from starvation edema. "When did you last eat?" she asked. Yuki's voice came out as a croak. 18 days ago." Dr. Chen's expression tightened, but she didn't scold or express shock. She simply nodded and made more notes. "We'll start you on small portions of easily digestible food. Your stomach has shrunk. Too much food too quickly could kill you. We'll build up gradually." Then she examined the infected cut on Yuki's left forearm, the one Yuki had been convinced would kill her through sepsis. The wound was angry and red, surrounded by streaks of infection radiating up her arm. Dr. Chen cleaned it with antiseptic that burned like fire. Yuki didn't flinch. Dr. Chen applied antibiotic ointment, wrapped the wound in clean gauze, then gave Yuki 2 white pills. Penicillin, she explained. Take these now and 2 more tonight. The infection should clear within a week. If it gets worse, tell someone immediately. The whole examination took 15 minutes. Then Dr. Chen moved to the next woman, and the next, and the next. No experiments, no torture, no degradation. Just medical care, methodical and competent and utterly professional. Yuki sat on a bench afterward, holding the pills in her palm, staring at them like they were alien artifacts. Medicine. The enemy had given her medicine. After the examinations, they were led to a bathing facility. A long building with shower heads protruding from the walls. Hot water. Real soap that smelled like flowers. Clean towels stacked on benches. A female American soldier stood at the entrance and explained in simple English, supplemented with hand gestures. Take as long as you need. Wash thoroughly. There are clean clothes afterward. If you need help, call out. Yuki stood under the shower and watched dirt and blood and weeks of accumulated filth swirl down the drain. The water was hot enough to sting her raw skin, hot enough to raise red welts where it hit. She didn't care. She scrubbed until her skin turned pink, until the water ran clear, until she could no longer smell the cave on herself. Around her, other women did the same. Some wept as they washed. Some scrubbed until they bled. Some just stood under the water and let it pour over them, washing away more than physical dirt. The woman next to Yuki was Haruko. She scrubbed herself with mechanical efficiency, her face expressionless. But when she thought no one was watching, she pressed her forehead against the tile wall and allowed herself one small moment of weakness. Her shoulders shook. Yuki pretended not to notice, granting the other woman the privacy of her breakdown. They were given clothes afterward. Simple cotton dresses in various sizes, worn but clean, smelling of laundry soap. Yuki's hung loose on her frame. She had lost nearly 20 kilograms since the battle began. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. A ghost wearing human skin. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, arms like sticks, collarbones protruding sharply. She looked like the propaganda photos of concentration camp victims she had seen in training materials. The irony was not lost on her. Keiko stood beside her at the mirror, drowning in a dress 2 sizes too large. The girl's eyes were enormous in her shrunken face. She looked at Yuki and whispered the question that hung in the air between all of them. Why are they doing this? What do they want from us? Yuki had no answer. Strategic kindness, long-term psychological manipulation, genuine humanitarian concern? She couldn't tell. The evidence didn't fit any model she understood. The sleeping quarters were another shock. Clean barracks with wooden floors and walls. Cots arranged in rows, each with a mattress, pillow, and 2 blankets. Windows with glass panes, not bars. A door that opened from the inside. Electric lights overhead. Each woman was assigned a bed. Guards were posted outside, visible through the windows. But they remained distant and non-threatening. They didn't pace menacingly. They didn't peer through the windows. They mostly stood around smoking cigarettes and talking quietly to each other. As darkness fell, dinner arrived. 2 American soldiers carried in large pots and set them on tables at the front of the barracks. Dr. Chen returned to supervise the meal. Small portions, she reminded them. I know you're starving, but eating too much will make you sick. We'll increase portions gradually over the next week. Rice, miso soup with tofu and seaweed, pickled vegetables, portions carefully calculated for stomachs that had forgotten how to process food. Yuki ate slowly, mechanically. Each bite felt like an accusation. Each swallow felt like betrayal. Her body wanted to wolf down the food, cram in as much as possible while it was available. But her mind knew that Dr. Chen was right. She forced herself to eat slowly, to chew thoroughly, to stop when the small portion was gone even though she was still hungry. Around her, the women ate in silence. Some cried quietly as they ate. Some stared at their food with expressions of disbelief. Some ate with methodical efficiency, treating it like a military operation. The only sounds were spoons scraping against bowls and the occasional suppressed sob. After the meal, Dr. Chen collected the bowls and left. The lights dimmed. The women retreated to their assigned cots. Yuki lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The mattress was thin but infinitely more comfortable than the cave floor. The pillow cradled her head. The blankets were scratchy but warm. Her stomach, unaccustomed to food, cramped and gurgled. Around her, the other women breathed softly in the darkness. Some cried quietly into their pillows. Some whispered prayers to gods that had failed them. Some lay rigid with tension, waiting for the other shoe to drop, certain that midnight would bring the violence they had been promised. Yuki's mind worked through the evidence like a telegraph operator decoding a message. She had been trained to find patterns, to extract meaning from noise. Data point 1. They were captured alive without being harmed. Data point 2. They received medical care, real treatment with real medicine. Data point 3. They were fed and sheltered in reasonable conditions. Data point 4. No violence had occurred. Data point 5. The Americans had disarmed themselves to avoid frightening them. Data point 6. Dr. Chen was Chinese-American, a woman who had every reason to hate the Japanese after what Japan had done to China, yet she treated them with compassion. Two possible conclusions presented themselves. Conclusion A. This was an elaborate psychological operation designed to extract information or break their spirits before the real torture began. Strategic kindness to create dependency and gratitude, making them more pliable subjects. Conclusion B. The propaganda was wrong. The Americans were not monsters. They were just people who treated prisoners according to some moral code that valued human life, regardless of nationality. Conclusion A made more sense. It fit with everything she had been taught. It explained the behavior as tactical rather than genuine, but it required assuming a level of sophistication and patience that seemed unlikely. If the Americans wanted information, why wait? Why invest resources in feeding and housing prisoners when interrogation would be more efficient? Conclusion. B was simpler, but impossible to accept. Accepting it meant accepting that everything she believed about the war was wrong. It meant accepting that her country had lied to her systematically and thoroughly. That realization was too devastating to contemplate. So she defaulted to conclusion A, not because the evidence supported it, but because the alternative was unbearable. She would watch, she would wait, she would document everything. Eventually, the truth would reveal itself. Sleep came in fragments, dreams mixed with memories, mixed with fear. Yuki woke repeatedly, heart racing, expecting to find guards dragging women from their beds, but the barracks remained quiet. Through the window, she could see stars and the shadow of a guard smoking a cigarette. Everything was normal in a way that felt deeply abnormal. Morning came with impossible gentleness. Dr. Chen entered with breakfast. Rice porridge with dried fish, tea, small portions again. The women ate in silence, but the edge of terror had dulled slightly. Nothing bad had happened during the night. That didn't mean nothing bad would happen, but it expanded the time frame of uncertainty. After breakfast, Private James Wilson appeared at the barracks entrance. He spoke in broken Japanese, smiling awkwardly. "Good morning. Today you can walk outside. Inside fence only. Stay with guard." He gestured to a female soldier. "This is Sergeant Mitchell. She will accompany you. You are not prisoners, you are protected persons." Protected persons. The term was unfamiliar. Wilson tried to explain. Geneva Convention, rules for war. Protect civilians and prisoners. Give food, medicine, shelter. No torture. No experiments. America signed treaty. We follow rules. The concept was alien. Rules in war. Morality on the battlefield. A small group ventured outside. Yuki joined them, driven by curiosity. Haruko refused, remaining on her cot with arms crossed. Keiko came, nervous but interested. They stepped into sunlight, Sergeant Mitchell walking beside them. The compound was larger than Yuki had realized. Several buildings arranged around a central yard. A medical facility marked with a red cross, storage warehouses, administrative offices. Sergeant Mitchell guided them along a gravel path. She was tall, maybe 30 years old, with brown hair pulled back and kind blue eyes. She spoke in simple English, gesturing. "This is hospital, this is food storage, this is headquarters." Her manner was patient, like a teacher rather than a guard. They passed American soldiers going about their business. Most glanced at the Japanese women with curiosity, but without hostility. A few nodded politely. The mundanity was more disturbing than violence would have been. These were supposed to be monsters. Monsters didn't look bored and homesick. Sergeant Mitchell led them to a bench under a tree. One woman asked in halting English, "Why? Why you kind to us?" Mitchell pulled out a photograph. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, grinning with missing front teeth. "My daughter," Mitchell said. "Emma. She is home in California. You are someone's daughter, someone's sister. War makes us enemies, but war ends. People stay. If Emma needs help someday, I hope someone helps her. So I help you." The logic was devastating in its simplicity. Yuki felt something crack inside her chest. This woman saw them as people, not as abstract enemies. The moral framework was so different from anything Yuki had been taught. They sat under the tree for an hour. Mitchell shared cigarettes with the women who smoked. She showed more pictures, talked about California, asked about their lives. Keiko talked about her clerk work. Another woman talked about teaching school. Yuki found herself discussing the telegraph office. Mitchell had worked as a telephone operator before the war. Similar work. Communication. Connecting people across distance. The days began to establish a rhythm. Morning meals. Medical checkups. Free time within the compound. Afternoon English lessons with Private Wilson. Evening meals. Lights out at 9. The routine was institutional but not harsh. Boring rather than terrifying. The women remained suspicious, but the sharp edge of terror dulled with each passing day. No one was harmed. No one disappeared. The food continued, portions gradually increasing. Small kindnesses accumulated like drops of water filling a container. Dr. Chen spent extra time with the women who had the worst injuries. Sergeant Mitchell brought Japanese language magazines from somewhere. An American cook learned to make onigiri. His first attempts were disasters, but he kept trying. The effort mattered more than the result. Yuki began keeping a secret journal, writing on scraps of fabric using charcoal. She hid her writings inside her pillowcase. Every night she documented the day. If this was psychological manipulation, she would have evidence. If it was genuine, she would have evidence of that too. Someone needed to bear witness. The entries were clinical at first. September 20th. Received breakfast. Dr. Chen conducted medical examination. No incidents of violence. September 21st. Private Wilson attempted English instruction. Evening meal included fish protein. Portions slightly increased. But as days passed, the entries became more personal. September 28th. Keiko laughed today. First time since capture. Private Wilson made a joke in Japanese. Keiko laughed and then looked guilty. Haruko glared at her. The camp divides. Those who begin to trust, and those who view trust as betrayal. The internal divisions among the women deepened. A group of younger women, including Keiko, began to actively engage with the Americans. They worked in the hospital, helping with basic tasks. They attended English lessons enthusiastically. They began to believe the kindness was real. Haruko led the opposite faction, the resistors who maintained rigid dignity through non-cooperation. She refused all offers of voluntary work. She treated every American interaction like a military negotiation, formal and cold. For her, adaptation was surrender. Acceptance was betrayal. She lectured the other women in harsh whispers. Don't be seduced by their kindness, it's a tactic. They want us to lower our guard. Every smile is manipulation. Every gift is a leash. We must resist. We must remember our duty. We must maintain our honor. The middle group, where Yuki remained, was the largest but most conflicted. They worked when asked but without enthusiasm. They learned enough English to function. They maintained psychological distance as a survival mechanism. The arguments grew heated and then explosive. One evening, Keiko announced she wanted to work in the hospital full-time. Dr. Chen had offered her a position. Keiko was excited about learning skills and feeling purposeful. Haruko confronted her in front of everyone. "You're collaborating," Haruko said flatly. "You're betraying the emperor. You're disgracing your family." Keiko's face flushed. "I'm surviving. The emperor didn't save us when we were starving. These people did." Haruko's voice turned ice cold. "So your loyalty is for sale for a bowl of rice." Keiko's response was raw and angry. "Loyalty isn't starvation. Honor isn't dying alone in the dark. I don't care what the emperor wants. He doesn't care what happens to me." Haruko slapped her. The crack echoed through the barracks. Keiko stumbled back, hand to her cheek. The barracks erupted. Women shouting, some supporting Haruko, some defending Keiko. Dr. Chen burst through the door with Sergeant Mitchell. Mitchell stepped between them. Dr. Chen spoke urgently. What happened? Who was hurt? No one answered. Dr. Chen looked at the red mark on Keiko's cheek and understood. She turned to Haruko with quiet intensity. I understand your anger. I understand your conflict. But violence against each other serves no purpose. You've all suffered enough. Don't add to that suffering. Haruko met her gaze. You understand nothing. You are enemy. We are prisoner. Kindness does not change fact. Dr. Chen's response was gentle but firm. You're right, I don't fully understand. But I know that you're human beings in an impossible situation. I know there's no right answer. All I ask is that you don't hurt each other. You're all you have. The war put you in this situation. Don't let it destroy your humanity too. The tension slowly drained. Women returned to their cots. Dr. Chen left reluctantly. Sergeant Mitchell stayed briefly, then withdrew. Yuki lay on her cot and wrote the longest journal entry yet. The camp has become a microcosm of Japan's crisis. We are divided between those who cling to the past and those who embrace the future, between honor and survival. Both sides believe they're right. Both have valid arguments. Perhaps that's the tragedy of war. It creates situations where every choice is wrong and right simultaneously. 6 weeks into their captivity, the door Yuki had been keeping shut was kicked open violently. Tomoko, the woman who had collapsed at the cave entrance, was in the medical ward. Her physical health had improved dramatically, but her mental state deteriorated. She spoke less each day. She stared at walls. She flinched when touched. One night she found broken glass. She waited until lights dimmed, then tried to cut her wrists. A passing medic found her within minutes. Dr. Chen arrived still in sleeping clothes and worked frantically to stop the bleeding. She saved Tomoko's life with minutes to spare. Yuki was there for the aftermath. She had been unable to sleep and followed the medics to the hospital. She stood in the doorway as Dr. Chen finished stitching Tomoko's wrists. The doctor sat beside the bed and spoke softly. Why? What made you do this? Tomoko's answer was barely audible. I can't go home like this. I've been captured. I've let Americans touch me. I've eaten their food. I'm polluted, contaminated. My family will be ashamed. Better to die here with some shred of honor than carry this shame back. Dr. Chen's composure broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She took Tomoko's bandaged hand. You are not polluted. You are a survivor. Being captured doesn't make you less human. Accepting help doesn't make you a traitor. Your life has value regardless of what anyone tells you. Your life has inherent value simply because you're alive. Tomoko turned away, crying. I was taught that death was preferable to surrender, that living as a prisoner brought shame, that my life only mattered if it served the nation. How do I go back believing none of that was true? Dr. Chen's response was passionate. You were taught wrong. The people who taught you those things were wrong. Life is not negotiable. Life is the only thing that matters absolutely. Everything else, honor, duty, loyalty, only means something if you're alive to embody it. Dead people have no honor. They're just dead. I don't know what your family will think, but I know you survived a war. You endured starvation and trauma. You chose to keep living. That's not shame. That's courage. The bravest thing anyone can do is choose to keep living when dying would be easier. Yuki stood frozen, feeling her worldview crumble. Dr. Chen noticed her. Their eyes met. The doctor spoke directly to Yuki. I know what you were told about us. I know you were taught we're monsters. But I became a doctor because I believe every life is sacred. Japanese, American, Chinese, it doesn't matter. When someone is suffering, you help them. That's what humans do. Yuki's voice came out strangled. Why? Why does America care about Japanese prisoners? We're your enemies. Doctor. Chen's answer was firm. Because today's enemy is tomorrow's neighbor. Because war ends but humanity continues. Because treating people with dignity prevents the next war. Because if we become monsters to fight monsters, then monsters are all that's left. Someone has to choose differently. Otherwise, what are we fighting for? Yuki fled the medical ward. She walked to the far corner of the compound and slid down to sit in the dirt. All her careful documentation of psychological warfare tactics suddenly seemed absurd. There was no elaborate plot, Just people treating other people with basic human decency. The simplicity was crushing. Sergeant Mitchell found her there. They sat in silence. Finally, Mitchell spoke slowly. War is terrible, but war doesn't change what's true. What's true is that you matter. Your life matters. Not because of your country or your emperor, because you're a human being. That's enough. Yuki responded in halting English. Why you do this? We are enemy. Mitchell pulled out Emma's photograph. When I'm here, I think, what if someday Emma needs help from a stranger? I hope that stranger would help her. So I help you. She pulled out a chocolate bar. For your mother, when you go home, give her this. Tell her an American thought of her. Yuki took the chocolate with shaking hands. The gesture broke something open. She began to cry. Mitchell put an arm around her shoulders and let her cry. That night, Yuki opened the door she had been keeping shut. She let herself feel the full weight of the truth. Her country had lied to her. The enemy had treated her with more humanity than her own leaders. It was agonizing, but it also meant she was still alive. It meant she could choose what to believe now. She would bear witness. She would tell the truth, no matter what it cost. 3 days later, Lieutenant Morrison called a formal assembly. All the women gathered in the common area. Morrison stood at the front, Sergeant Mitchell beside him for translation. He was an older man, probably 40, with gray at his temples and kind eyes that had seen too much. The war is over. Japan has surrendered unconditionally. Emperor Hirohito has commanded all Japanese forces to lay down their arms. Your country is beginning the long process of rebuilding. The United States is committed to helping through the occupation authority. But you all have decisions to make about your own futures. He paused. We are offering 2 options. First, you can stay here and work in the reconstruction efforts. We need help with medical services, translation, administrative support. You will be paid fair wages, the same as American civilian employees. You will have housing, food, medical care. You will be safe. Second, you can return to Japan. Repatriation ships are being organized. If you choose to go home, we will transport you safely and provide basic supplies for your journey. This is completely your choice. No one will judge you. Both choices are valid. Both have challenges. Take 1 week to think. Discuss among yourselves. At the end of 1 week, tell us your decision. Remember, whatever you choose, you'll carry that choice for the rest of your life. Choose based on what you can live with, not what others expect. The announcement sparked immediate chaos. The acceptors announced loudly they would stay. Why return to a country that sent them to die? Why go back to families that would view them as tainted? Better to build new lives here, where their existence was valued. The resistors, led by Haruko, insisted return was the only honorable option. Pride demanded it. Duty demanded it. They would face whatever awaited them at home with dignity. They would prove Japanese spirit could not be broken by captivity. The middle group fractured. Arguments erupted. Friendships broke. The barracks became a battlefield of competing loyalties. Keiko approached Yuki that evening, eyes bright with conviction and fear. I'm staying. I've decided. My family's house in Naha was destroyed. My parents are probably dead. Even if they're alive, what do I offer them? I'm 20 years old with no education. I'm traumatized. I would be a burden. She grabbed Yuki's hands. But here I can work. Doctor, Chen offered to train me as a medical assistant. Real training. A real skill. I can help people. Maybe someday, when Japan is rebuilt, I can go back as someone successful instead of someone broken. Please stay with me. We can start over together. Yuki shook her head slowly. I can't. I have to go back. Keiko's face fell. Why? To suffer? To be called a traitor? Yuki's answer came from her core. The truth. Someone has to tell the truth. If all of us who know the truth stay here, then the lies win. The people back home will never know what really happened. They'll keep believing the propaganda. The next war will be built on the same foundations as this one. She squeezed Keiko's hands. But if I go back, if I tell people what I saw, what we learned here, maybe something changes. Maybe one person listens. Maybe that person tells someone else. Maybe truth spreads the way lies spread. Maybe I can prevent one person from suffering the way we suffered. Maybe that's enough purpose for a life. Keiko pulled her into a fierce hug, both crying. Then take this. She pressed a folded paper into Yuki's hand. It's a letter from my parents. If you find them, tell them I'm alive. Tell them I'm sorry I couldn't come back. Tell them their daughter found a place in the world where her life has value. Tell them I'm happy, even if it's a lie. Yuki promised. She would find Keiko's parents if they lived. She would deliver the letter and the message. It was a small thing, a tiny act of grace in a world that had forgotten grace. The night before the ships departed, the women who were staying organized a small gathering. They pooled resources to create something resembling a proper Japanese meal. Rice prepared properly, miso soup that actually tasted right, pickled vegetables contributed by the American cook. They ate together, all 27 women united for one last evening. Old arguments were set aside. They shared food. They shared memories. They sang old folk songs. They cried. They laughed. They mourned and celebrated simultaneously. Dr. Chen came to say goodbye to those leaving. She gave each woman a small medical kit, bandages, antiseptic, basic medicines, instructions in Japanese. For your journey and for after. Take care of yourself. Yuki bowed deeply. Dr. Chen stopped her. Don't bow to me. We're equals. Just two women trying to make the world slightly less terrible. Yuki straightened, met her eyes. Thank you for seeing me as human. Dr. Chen's eyes glistened. Thank you for surviving. Sergeant Mitchell gave Yuki her address in California. If you ever need help, write to me. If you ever want to tell your story to someone who will listen, I will listen. And Yuki, you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. Going back takes more courage than staying. Yuki tried to speak. Couldn't. Just nodded. Lieutenant Morrison shook Yuki's hand. You're a remarkable woman. I hope Japan realizes how lucky they are to have you. Yuki didn't feel remarkable. She felt terrified. But she boarded the ship anyway. The voyage back to Japan took 8 days. The returning women huddled on deck, watching the ocean, processing their complex feelings. Some rehearsed their stories, deciding which parts to tell and which to hide. Some planned to lie completely, claiming they were forced laborers who endured terrible treatment. Easier that way. Safer. When other women asked what she would say, Yuki told them the truth. I will tell the truth. They looked at her like she was insane. One woman, Rin, pulled Yuki aside. They'll destroy you. You tell people the Americans treated you well, they'll call you a collaborator. Your name will be poison. Yuki met her gaze. Then I'll be poison. But I'll be honest poison. Rin shook her head. Your honesty won't change anything. People believe what they want to believe. Yuki's response was soft but unyielding. Maybe. But I have to try. Close your eyes and don't scream. That's what we were told. But I'm done closing my eyes. I'm going to open them as wide as possible. I'm going to scream if that's what it takes to be heard. The ship docked in Yokohama. The port was devastated. Buildings reduced to rubble. Allied forces controlled everything. Japanese civilians moved through the ruins like ghosts. The returning women were processed through a repatriation center. They received basic supplies, food rations, blankets, travel documents. Then they were released into the chaos of post-war Japan. Yuki made her way to Tokyo on foot and by hitching rides. The city she had known was gone. Entire neighborhoods erased. She found the address where Keiko's parents had lived. Just rubble. She asked neighbors. An old man remembered them. Killed in the firebombing. March 9th. Whole family. Yuki clutched Keiko's letter, feeling the weight of promises she couldn't keep. She searched for her own family. Through persistence and luck, Yuki found a neighbor who knew where her mother had evacuated. A small village 50 kilometers west. Yuki walked. It took 2 days. She found her mother living in a converted barn with 6 other refugee families. Their reunion was not what Yuki had imagined. Her mother stared at her like she was seeing a ghost. Yuki, we thought you were dead. They held each other briefly. Then her mother pulled back, studying her face. How did you survive? Where have you been? I was captured by the Americans. Her mother's expression hardened immediately. You surrendered? Yuki shook her head. I was starving. We all were. They found us in caves. They gave us medical care and food. They treated us with dignity. Her mother's face closed off completely. You collaborated. Yuki felt the accusation like a physical blow. I survived. There's a difference. Her mother turned away. Survival without honor is not survival. You should have died as a Japanese woman. Yuki's voice shook. I am a Japanese woman. I'm a Japanese woman who chose life over death. I'm a Japanese woman who learned that the emperor lied to us, that we were taught to hate people who turned out to be more humane than our own leaders." Her mother whirled back, fury in her eyes. "How dare you speak against the emperor?" Yuki met her anger with heartbreak. "How dare he send us to die for his pride?" "Mother, I watched women try to kill themselves because they believed they were polluted. I watched a doctor cry over saving a prisoner's life. I was given chocolate to bring home to you, given by an American soldier who thought of you as someone's mother, not as an enemy." She pulled out the chocolate bar, held it out. Her mother stared at it like it was poisoned. "I will not accept gifts from the enemy. They're not the enemy anymore," Yuki pleaded. "The war is over. We have to learn to live in a new world." Her mother's response was ice. "The war may be over, but our principles remain. You have been corrupted. Until you renounce this betrayal, you are not welcome in this house." "I can't renounce the truth," Yuki whispered. "Then you can't stay here." Yuki nodded slowly. She bowed formally. "Goodbye, Mother." Her mother didn't respond. Yuki walked out into the night, but she was not alone. Over the following months, Yuki found others like herself. People who had seen through the propaganda, veterans who witnessed the reality of war, civilians who experienced American occupation and found it less brutal than expected. They formed quiet networks. They helped each other survive in a society that viewed them with suspicion. Yuki found work at a makeshift school for war orphans. Hundreds of children had lost their families. Yuki began teaching them basic literacy and mathematics. But more than that, she taught them to think critically, to question what they were told, to value truth over comfortable lies. One day a boy asked, "Do you hate the Americans?" Yuki considered carefully. "I hate war. I hate what war does to people. But the American soldiers I met were just people. Some were kind. Some were scared. Some were trying to do their best in a terrible situation. Just like us." The boy frowned. "But they bombed us. They destroyed everything." Yuki nodded. "They did. And that was terrible. War is full of terrible things done by all sides. But the question isn't whether terrible things happened. The question is what we do now. Do we let hate control us forever? Or do we learn from the past and try to build something better?" The children listened. They questioned. They argued. They thought. It wasn't much. It wasn't going to change Japan overnight. But it was something. Seeds planted. Yuki died in 1989, 44 years after her capture. She lived long enough to see Japan rebuild and prosper, long enough to see reconciliation between former enemies, long enough to see the next generation grow up in peace. In her final years, she wrote a memoir. She detailed everything: the caves, the capture, the kindness, the return, the rejection. She included excerpts from her fabric journal. She included Sergeant Mitchell's address. They had corresponded for decades. She included Dr. Chen's advice about the sacredness of life. The memoir was published posthumously. It created controversy. Some praised it as necessary truth. Others condemned it as collaboration. But it was read. Thousands of copies. People who had been told only one version of the war suddenly had access to another perspective. It didn't change everyone's mind, but it changed some minds, and some was better than none. The last entry in Yuki's journal, written a week before she died, read, "I spent my youth being told to close my eyes and don't scream, to accept death with silent dignity, to value honor over life. But I learned something in that prisoner camp that my own country never taught me. I learned that being seen as human is the greatest gift anyone can give you. I learned that kindness is not weakness. I learned that mercy is the most powerful force in the world, because it forces you to recognize the humanity in yourself and others. I was told the Americans were monsters. They were not. They were people who chose to see people. That's all I've tried to do with the rest of my life. See people, see them clearly, with open eyes, and when necessary, scream as loud as I can so others might see them too. Close your eyes and don't scream. That was the old way, the way that led to war and suffering. Open your eyes and see clearly. That's the new way. That's the only way forward." It was enough. Not for everyone, not for every situation, but for some people in some moments, it was enough. The war ended with bombs and surrender documents, but peace begins with moments of recognition. One person seeing another person's humanity. One act of unexpected kindness, one truth spoken against a tide of lies, one woman who refused to close her eyes, who refused to stay silent. Yuki Nakamura was not a hero. She was a survivor who chose honesty over comfort. That made her something rarer than a hero. It made her a witness. And witnesses, especially uncomfortable ones, are what prevent history from repeating itself. They keep the door open to a different future. They remind us that the most dangerous weapon is not the bomb or the bullet. It is the hand that refuses to strike when it has every reason to do so. It is the voice that tells the truth when lies are easier. It is the person who opens their eyes when everyone else keeps theirs closed. That is what changes the world. Not dramatically, not quickly, but permanently, one open eye at a time.